Have you ever wondered what really happens in the silence after an unexpected absence? Not the physical absence, but the one that cuts to the soul. When someone disappears without a trace, without an explanation, without a goodbye. What lurks in the abyss between what was said and what will never be explained? Maybe you think you know how a man reacts when a woman simply disappears. But the truth is, his reaction doesn't begin with anger. It begins with emptiness. An emptiness that pulsates. An emptiness that speaks. What if I told you that it's precisely in this emptiness that he discovers, for the first time, what he never saw while you were there? There are pains that don't scream. They reveal themselves in the echo of what was left unsaid. A woman's silent disappearance isn't absence. It's amplified presence. A presence that grows with time, with regret, with the doubt that gnaws silently. Because when she disappears without warning, she leaves behind an emotional labyrinth from which he can't escape, and that changes everything. They say men don't feel, that they are rational, cold, detached. But this is an illusion built to protect something much more fragile. Fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of not having left a mark. Fear of realizing that what they ignored was exactly what they needed most. The wordless disappearance is not an end. It's the beginning of an internal war. And he will wage it silently, night after night, with questions no one else can answer. What does he feel? He will never tell you. But you will sense it. It's in the small attempts to get your attention. In the late likes, the meaningless messages, the lost look when someone mentions his name. It's in the absence of answers, in the narratives he invents for himself, trying to survive the guilt, the regret, the loss. He feels it, yes, but he feels it when it's too late. When your absence becomes the cruelest mirror of what he was unable to value. If you've ever disappeared from someone without saying anything, or if you're thinking about doing so, know this: you don't disappear. You become a haunting memory. And if you want to understand where this absence can take him, don't look away. Every second of this video is a missing piece of an emotional puzzle he'll never put together on his own. Subscribe to the channel. Not for me, but for you. Because understanding what he feels in silence can give you the power to rewrite the story, or end it with dignity. The choice is yours. But time, it doesn't forgive those who don't listen to what silence has to say. There's an instant, almost invisible, when pride takes the place of pain. He doesn't cry, doesn't call, doesn't ask, and that's why many believe he doesn't feel it. But what few understand is that male pride, when wounded, doesn't express itself with tears. It protects itself with silence. A silence that screams from within, while the body tries to maintain a mask of indifference. When you disappear without warning, without explanation, something inside him breaks, but the break doesn't come with a bang. It comes like a slow crack, growing a little wider each day, under the weight of what he refuses to face. He starts by telling himself he doesn't care, that this is normal, that women come and go. But soon he finds himself going back to recent conversations, reviewing old messages, trying to remember if he said something wrong, if he missed a signal. His mind, which prides itself on controlling everything, becomes unstable ground where unresolved emotions hide under the dry earth of denial. And with each day you remain absent, he digs deeper, but pretends to remain intact. It's not that he doesn't feel. He just doesn't know where to store what he feels without appearing weak. There are men who prefer physical pain to this invisible wound that silent abandonment causes. Because physical pain ends. The pain of wounded pride does not. It echoes in the form of unanswered questions, fantasies of revenge, desperate attempts to appear well when everything inside him is falling apart. And even when he smiles at others, even when he continues his routine, there's a part of him that remains paralyzed by the last time he saw you. Or worse, the last time he thought you'd still be there the next day. But you weren't. And this unexpected absence becomes a mirror of his own omissions. Deep down, he wanted to believe you'd always be there. Even when he ignored you. Even when he spoke little. Even when he made you feel invisible. Your presence was the comfort he took for granted. The mistake was thinking that love is eternal when it's mistreated. And when you disappear, pride tries to say it doesn't matter. But the body reacts differently. Sleep no longer comes easily. The eyes search without wanting to. The name burns when it appears. And pride, which was once armor, becomes a prison. Because it's pride that now prevents him from seeking you, even knowing there might still be time. But does he realize? Does his pride protect him? Or condemn him? Does he understand that what hurts him most isn't you leaving, it's you not warning him, not asking for attention, not making a scene? It's the emptiness without drama, without explanation, without closure. A silence that weighs more heavily than any fight. Because, deep down, this was precisely what he never expected, to be left without the chance to stop it. And that's when pride transforms. No longer a shield, but a bitter reminder that those who love too late, love alone. If something inside you has experienced this silent dance between presence and absence, between pride and loss, leave in the comments what was kept. A memory, a pain, a question that never had an answer. Perhaps your story reflects that of many who are here now, trying to understand what was never said. When you disappear without saying anything, he enters a state of silent emotional vigil. Outwardly, the routine continues, but inside, something begins to stir, and it's not peace. It's restlessness. The male mind, trained to control, plan, and resolve, doesn't handle empty spaces well. So it begins to fill the silence with questions, assumptions, and imaginary scenarios. He mentally revisits every conversation, every gesture, searching for signs he might have overlooked. What if you seemed okay? What if he didn't notice what you were feeling? Doubt consumes him more than any hard answer. This obsessive search for answers isn't just curiosity, it's an attempt to regain control of the narrative. He needs to understand the reason for your disappearance so he doesn't feel powerless, discarded, vulnerable. So he goes through photos, old messages, talks to friends, searches for signs between the lines of what was said, or worse, what never was. He turns your silence into a puzzle he must decipher. Because accepting that you simply left, without a goodbye or explanation, is accepting that he may have lost something precious without even realizing it. And this scares him more than he's willing to admit. The more time passes, the more absence transforms into internal noise. Not hearing anything from you becomes more deafening than any scream. And this absence activates the most human part of him, the need for meaning. But how can he make sense of what wasn't said? How can he find logic in a disappearance that didn't ask permission? He begins to project assumptions. Maybe you're with someone else, maybe you never felt anything, maybe you just got tired. But none of these hypotheses brings peace, because they all have one thing in common. He had no chance to stop it. And this helplessness follows him silently, like a question that never stops. When you disappear without saying anything, one of the first shadows that invades his mind is the fear of being replaced. This thought doesn't arrive logically, but as an uncomfortable sensation, a chill that runs through his stomach and whispers, "She's already with someone else." Even if he denies it, laughs, or feigns indifference, this doubt settles in some corner of his mind and begins to grow. Absence, combined with absolute silence, creates a fertile space for the most painful projections. And in this space, he doesn't imagine you alone. He imagines you in someone else's arms, smiling at someone who isn't him. This fear of replacement isn't just about jealousy. It touches on something deeper. The fear of not being enough, of not having made an impact, of being just another person in your life. He thinks about the times he didn't appreciate the details, the interrupted conversations, the time he didn't give. And now, all of this returns as a kind of emotional punishment. He begins to compare himself to other men, real or imagined, trying to figure out where he lost the competition. Because, to him, your disappearance doesn't feel like a choice for loneliness, but a choice for someone better. And this directly affects his male pride, which detests the idea of being disposable. Even though he tries to convince himself that everything is fine, he feels the emotional instability inside. Not knowing the truth makes him hostage to his own fantasies. Doubt becomes a slow, silent, constant poison. And every time he sees you active on social media, every new post, every story that disappears before he can watch it, becomes a trigger. He wants to believe he doesn't feel it, but the truth is, the fear of being forgotten before he even realizes his importance consumes him. Because the worst part isn't seeing you with someone else. It's imagining that maybe you were never really his. It's curious how some men only realize a woman's value when she disappears. As long as she's there, present, available, interested, he gets used to it. Her constant presence becomes invisible, and her gestures, no matter how profound, seem banal. But the moment she disappears without warning, a void appears, and that void begins to speak. It speaks through the silence on the phone, The absence of a message, the lack of a voice to hear it was once an effortless part of his routine. Suddenly, he feels a different presence. Her absence becomes a living force, and the absence begins to scream where before there was silence. Absence, over time, transforms into a mirror. And in this mirror, he sees clearly everything he previously ignored. He remembers the details he never mentioned, the words she said that he didn't truly hear, the time she needed to be noticed, and he simply didn't. It is in this moment that he discovers that what seemed assured was actually fragile. That love, when poorly watered, dries up. And that the presence of a woman he loves is not eternal if it is unacknowledged. Her absence then becomes a cruel but effective teacher. She teaches him, without saying a word, what he refused to learn when she was near. But this learning comes late. Because now he feels her importance in the simplest details. In the time she used to text, in the lack of a comment about his day, in the bed that seems colder even when he's surrounded by people. And everything he treated as every day becomes weighed down by longing. The routine that was once automatic becomes a minefield of memories. And with each memory, the awareness grows that losing something that seemed small, but once fulfilled so much, can be one of the hardest pains to admit. Because her silence, now, speaks louder than any words. There's something a man almost never expects, to be confronted by emotions he can't name. When a woman disappears without saying a word, he's forced to deal with an emptiness he can't rationalize. And it's in this internal, uncomfortable, and unfamiliar space that vulnerability begins to emerge. The same vulnerability he learned to hide since he was a boy, stifled by catchphrases like, "It's okay," or "It doesn't matter." But now, there aren't enough distractions to silence what's welling up inside. He doesn't know how to deal with it, because he wasn't taught to feel, he was taught to endure. At first, he tries to fill the silence with anything. Work, social media, new contacts, long, empty nights. But none of this silences the growing discomfort. The problem isn't outside. It's inside. It's as if her absence opens a door he's always kept locked. A door that harbors all the questions he avoids, all the needs he denies, all the pain that hasn't yet healed. Her disappearance acts like an unexpected mirror, reflecting not what he shows the world, but what he hides from himself. And what he sees there is often disconcerting. This vulnerability disarms him. For the first time in a long time, he realizes he has no control. Not over what he feels, not over what he's lost, not over what she will or won't do. And it's on this shaky ground that he experiences an almost forgotten sensation, that of not being invincible. Maybe he won't say it to anyone. Maybe he can't even put it into words. But he feels it. He feels her absence like an inner call. Not just to find her again, but to find himself again. Because what hurt wasn't just her leaving, it was everything he discovered about himself after she left. When he realizes he's lost control, he starts acting. But not in the mature, conscious way you might expect. He tries to provoke you. He drops hints. He likes your old photos. He responds to stories with comments that border on disinterest but carry intent. It's as if every small action is a test to gauge your reaction, an invisible thread of contact to see if you're still on the other side. He won't admit he misses you, so he plays games. Silent games, disguised as indifference, but driven by a hidden urgency, to bring you back without having to tell you he lost you. These actions are disguised attempts to regain the emotional control he lost when you disappeared. He wants to feel like he still affects you, that he still has power over your feelings, that you still notice what he does. Deep down, he knows he's reacting to your silence, but he prefers to believe he's in control. Pride prevents him from reaching out to you directly, so he opts for indirect strategies. But every gesture, every provocation, every attempt to get attention reveals only one thing. He feels you more now in your absence than he did when you were present. And it's in this contradictory movement that he gets caught up. He wants you back, but without having to ask. He wants your presence, but without making himself vulnerable. He wants to prove he still has power, even if he's emotionally crumbling. The silence you left forces him to confront his own powerlessness, and this powerlessness compels him to act. But to act without the courage to show himself. And so, he struggles between the desire for reconnection and the fear of admitting his feelings. He doesn't know that the more he tries to provoke you, the more he makes it clear that what he really feels is, he wants to be noticed by you, one last time. Time, when combined with silence, turns absence into something almost unbearable. In the first few days, he tries to minimize it. He tells himself you'll come back, that it's just a phase, that maybe you're craving attention. But the days pile up, and what was an attempt at dismissal begins to turn into restlessness. Time, instead of erasing, amplifies. And the longer you remain silent, the more your absence becomes glaring. The routine, once filled with your presence, now reveals empty spaces he didn't even know existed, and it's in these voids that desire grows, day after day, fueled by absence. Every unanswered moment becomes an involuntary reminder of what he's lost. Memories that once seemed ordinary now take on a different weight. He remembers details he never valued. The way you laughed, the silent glances, the touches that would be missed even in the briefest of encounters. Time ceases to be an ally and becomes a kind of judge. And in this internal judgment, he begins to realize that perhaps he was remiss, perhaps he waited too long, perhaps he underestimated the depth of what you had. The absence, which once seemed fleeting, begins to feel permanent, and that's when he comes into conflict with his own certainty. With each day you remain distant, something in him recalibrates. What seemed guaranteed no longer feels so certain. What seemed disposable now seems irreplaceable. And the silence, which he initially tried to ignore, begins to feel like a silent scream, a constant presence that haunts him in the most unexpected details. Time, which so many claim heals, begins to corrode him. And when he realizes that you won't return, that time brings no answers, that the silence is unbreakable, he feels something he may never have truly felt: longing. But not just any longing. It's the longing for something he only recognized when he could no longer touch it. When the silence drags on and no explanation arrives, he begins to construct stories within his own mind. These are narratives fueled by assumptions, fears, insecurities, and versions he creates to try to make sense of what he doesn't understand. He needs to fill the void with something, anything, that will help justify your disappearance. Perhaps he tells himself that you were immature, that you acted on impulse, that you were emotionally unstable. Or, at the other extreme, that you never truly loved him. These narratives aren't truths. They're defenses. He tries to protect his pride from the open wound of uncertainty. Over time, these stories gain substance. And the curious thing is that he begins to believe them. Even without ever asking you directly what happened, he begins to act as if he knows. These invented truths help him cope with the pain without having to face it head-on. Because accepting that perhaps he was the one who made a mistake, that he was insensitive, absent, or too distant, would be confronting a guilt he's not yet ready to accept. The narratives he creates aren't just excuses. They're ways of maintaining the illusion of control over something he's, deep down, completely lost. But these stories have a side effect. They distance him even further from reality. He begins to react to versions of you that may never have existed. And every time he considers reaching out to you, he hesitates, because the image he's created has already convinced him it would be futile. He hides behind hypotheses because the truth, if revealed, could hurt more than he's willing to bear. And so, between the absence of what was real and the presence of what he's invented, he distances himself not only from you, but also from himself. He becomes trapped in an emotional illusion that, while protecting him from immediate pain, condemns him to a permanent distance from what he truly felt. There's an instant between sound and silence where everything reveals itself, not in words, but in sensations that refuse to be ignored. It's in this space that man perceives absence not as a void, but as a presence that challenges him to look within himself. What seemed like a loss is actually a mirror of what remained to be felt, to be understood, to be cared for. And in this unexpected reflection lies a truth that can no longer be denied. Her silence is not the end, but an invitation for him to awaken to what truly matters. This silent absence becomes a presence that echoes through time, a note that vibrates even when the music seems to have ended. It carries the power of an enigma that seeks no immediate solution, but rather plants seeds of transformation in the soul. What was lost on the outside can be found within, in the fissures of pride, in the crevices of vulnerability, in the courage to admit that what hurts most is not the departure, but the silence that prevents the reunion. And it is this silent awakening that changes everything, because nothing truly felt can be forgotten. Allow may this echo resonate within you as an invitation to see beyond absences, to hear what was left unsaid, to feel what has been kept hidden in the shadow of silence. Perhaps there are no easy answers, perhaps the journey is long, but true transformation happens when we accept that silence is not an end, but rather an open door to the unknown that pulses within each of us. You who have watched this far, stand before this door. What will you do with this key you now hold in your hands? If you felt something you couldn't name, if a shadow stirred in your heart, this is the time to act, not on impulse, but by conscious choice. Like, comment on your own stories. Share this truth that now resonates within you. Sign up to be part of a journey where silence is not emptiness, but sacred territory of profound discoveries. Because here we offer no quick fixes, but invitations to awaken, grow, and transform. And it all begins with the courage to listen to what silence has to say.